welcome to Gardening in 58 North. In this video I'd like to give you guys an update on my elephant foot vine here. So quite a bit has happened since the last update. The last update was back in 2019 when it was just going into dormancy. I think that was kind of around summertime. So what's happened since then is it put on a new floss of growth, and as you can see from now it has actually died down, but it did grow quite nicely. So you can see there I did have quite a lot of leaves. It grew quite well, but the reason it hasn't grown as much as I would have liked is because of the house move. So I'll pan back down to the tuber now and show you some of the growth that we've had. So because of the house move, the growth was a little bit slowed down. What's happened is it grew up plenty fine whilst it was in its original home, and it put on lots of leaves, but instead of being able to absorb as much energy as it would have, we had a house move. So I moved to a new location. It was then sitting in a conservatory which was quite cold. It didn't have heating for a while. It got quite close to freezing. So it didn't go dormant because the cold weather actually encourages it to keep its greenery, because it's winter time that this normally has greenery on it, and it just loses its greenery in the summertime to go dormant, because where it comes from in the wild in South Africa, they're very hot dry summers and it's too dry for the plant to grow. So the plant only grows in winter time and only has leaves in winter time when there's enough water for it. Although it didn't completely stop growing, it did slow right down. So you can see, for example, here what's happened with the growth rings. What this does is this plant has lots of different growth rings. It grows from basically where the cracks are here, and it pushes all the material out, and the whole thing will slowly expand. So the parts that are oldest are the ones right on the tips here. These sections of bark right on the tip, that's actually when it was a tiny little golf ball sized plant, and it will just keep pushing up new growth rings as it ages. So the first few years I had this, I managed to grow it quite successfully, and you can see the space between the growth rings is quite large. The darker sections tend to be when it's just going into dormancy or coming out of dormancy, and it grows quite slow, and the lighter sections are when it's got all its leaves established and it's absorbing as much energy as possible and it's putting large amounts of growth on. So you can see the newest growth rings, which are right in the crevices, they're actually really dark, so it didn't manage to gather as much energy as it has done in previous years. The last two seasons haven't been great for it. The second last season had problems with aphids and thrips, and that slowed it down. So it's been dormant now for quite a while, and if I just pull up here, you should be able to see there is a tiny bit of growth just starting to come in. So this here is actually the new growth which has just started to appear. What I've been doing with this is it went dormant in around about May-June time, when it started to heat up in the conservatory. Because the conservatory is very dependent on sunlight levels, when it's sunny it gets really hot in the conservatory, up to 30 or 40 degrees. So what happened is it got quite hot weather, the plant thought it was summer, it decided to go dormant. And what I did when it went dormant is I actually brought it inside the house where the temperature is a constant 20 degrees, and I just kept it a little bit cooler, trying to encourage it to shorten its dormancy period. The dormancy period on elephant foot vines tends to be quite sporadic. You can't really, it's kind of hard to predict when it's going to come out of dormancy or go into dormancy, but generally it grows and has greenery in winter and goes completely dormant in summer. But you can try and tweak it by changing the temperature and the watering, but a plant just really does what it wants to do, and there's not much you can do to change that. So I kept it a bit cooler for whilst it was dormant, try and make it think it was going back into winter. I did keep it dry, because when it's dormant it's really easy to overwater it, and because there's no leaves transpiring, any water you give it sits in the pot for a long time. So I kept it almost completely dry. I only watered it probably once a month, and even then I would only give it a small amount of water. But more recently I've been giving it a little bit more water, so every 2 weeks or so, and today was the first day I actually noticed a little bit of growth starting, so it's just about to start growing. But I'll show you a close-up of another shoot now and just give you an idea of what it looks like just before the growth starts, so you can have an earlier indication of when you might be expecting it to come out of dormancy. So you can see the two shoots there. So this shoot on the right here, this is basically what it looks like just before it goes into a new growth phase. What you get is around about where the old growing points used to be, where you can see the old cut stems. You get a small mound starting to form, and it just kind of has this kind of brown effect. It forms a point. That will sit there for a few weeks before it breaks, but that's an indication that it's just starting to come out of dormancy. Then when it does come out of dormancy, what you'll get is it breaking just like this here. A small green shoot will appear. That green shoot will grow slowly for the first week or so, and then after about a week it will grow really fast, and it will quickly cover any kind of support you give it. It does tend to start off breaking out of dormancy quite slow, and then once that shoot's about 5 centimeters, 10 centimeters long, it just takes off and it grows almost an inch a day when it gets going. Now the reason it grows so fast is in the wild, what it does is it sits there waiting for rain. When the rain comes, it needs to quickly grow, climb up on top of the other nearby plants and start shading out the nearby plants before they can get established. So as soon as the rain comes, puts its roots down, absorbs the water, and then it grows as fast as it possibly can. Make sure it smothers all the other plants so it can get its light that it needs and make the most of the rainy season. So what it's going to do now is grow really rapidly, and I need to make sure I've got some new supports for it. So what I do need to do is take off the old material and the old supports, because I'm going to be giving this a much bigger framework to grow on. It really outgrew its framework last year, and the problem is the way this grows is it's used to living in shrubland or kind of small trees. So what it does is the first section of growth, it tends to have no leaves at all. So you can see this here, the first section of stem doesn't really have any leaves at all, it doesn't really branch, it just grows straight up, tries to get as high as possible, and then higher up, once it gets to the top of the tree, then it puts on all the side branches and all the leaves. So you tend to have quite a bare section at the bottom. Now what I could do to remedy this is I could actually cut this shoot when it's quite young. What that would do is it would cause all these little side sections here, so you can see here these little lumps, that's where it used to have leaves, and these can actually become side shoots. So if I cut this when it was about 10 centimeters tall, what it will then do is put out lots of side shoots and it will branch a lot lower down. So if you want to have it on a low structure, that's something you can do. Wait till the shoot becomes about 10 centimeters tall, cut off the very top centimeter, then all these side shoots will be encouraged to grow. You'll get a much bushier plant and it won't need as much space, it will be a lot lower down. But as I've got a conservatory, what I'm probably going to do is let it grow right up to the top of the conservatory. I've got the space for it to grow tall, so I'm going to make some kind of structure at the top of the conservatory to support it. I could have it lower down, but I feel like there's quite a lot of other plants at that kind of level, and I want the space for the other plants. So if I have this nice and tall, then that way I can keep the bottom nice and clear. This is just going to be in a small pot, it's not taking up a lot of space, gives me more space for my other plants. So I'll cut this off now. I just need to be careful not to damage that new shoot, and I'll need to also take away the original support as well. So though it hasn't grown a huge amount since the last time, it has actually, I did have a look at the old photos, and it has grown substantially bigger. It is obvious that it has expanded in size. As I say, the growth hasn't been as rapid as it has in previous years. As you can see, the size of the bands in previous years. So although the growth wasn't that rapid, there was definitely an increase in the size of the tuber this year, so it still did quite well. It's starting to get some really nice markings on it now as well. I quite like the kind of darker bands, so although it means that we haven't expanded the plant as quickly as it has in the first few seasons, we do have some really nice patterns that are going to come onto the rest of the structure as it ages. What I'm hoping for now is some rapid growth, and then I can get this darker band to move up further, and that will give it a nice kind of banding effect as it grows. If it has another slow season, it's just going to continue this kind of slow pace with the dark pattern to it, but I would quite like to have a lighter section coming in and have some nice stripes. I'm quite happy with how it looks. It's a little bit more spiky than some of the pictures I've seen of other ones. So for example, the bits that stick up here are really quite large. Other people are sometimes a bit more shallow, the way that this kind of peeks out, but it just gives it an interesting look. It'll be interesting to see how it goes as time goes on. What tends to happen is these bigger sections will split into smaller sections. So this one here, for example, that's quite a big growing plate that it's got there. What this is going to do is it's going to split, and this is going to become 2 or 3 growing plates. So you can see there's already a big crack starting to appear, and that's how this generally happens. You have one big growing plate, so this was a growing plate originally. These cracks start to appear, and then you get new growing plates appearing. So that's generally how it happens. It looks almost like plate tectonics, to be honest. You've got all these kind of plates, and they almost look like they move around. They don't actually move around, but they do split and get into smaller sections. As the plant gets bigger, it needs to have these plates to keep roughly the same size, or if anything, gets slightly smaller so that it can continue expanding. If they didn't split, they would just get bigger and bigger. It will make it more difficult for the plant to grow. So it just has to basically split the plates up so it continue expanding without ripping itself apart. So that's about it for this video. What I'm going to do now is keep this well watered. I'm going to put it in a quite cool part of the conservatory. What this likes is it likes the bottom half to be relatively cool. It doesn't like direct sun. In nature, what would happen is it would have the top half in the trees, really warm sunshine, and the leaves will get lots of light. The bottom half will stay under the leaves. That will be kept shaded, and because it's winter time, it'll be quite cool. So there's a part of the conservatory I have where this will be behind one of my new grow boxes. That'll be quite cool because it's going to be in the shade, and also it's quite close to the wall, and the wall's not very well insulated, so there's a lot of cool air that kind of comes down from the wall. So that will keep the bottom nice and cool. The top half though will be in the direct sunlight, and that should give me maximum growth. So I'm expecting much better growth this time. The trickiest thing I have is the time of the year. At the moment the daylight's still quite good. It's the 1st of September, so we've got not too bad daylight, but as soon as the autumn equinox comes in here in Scotland, we really have very short days, and this will take a month or two to get to its full size with its leaves. So what it will do then is it'll put all its energy that's stored in this big tumour into that new growth, into the vine. It won't really collect much more energy in the next month or two, so although we've got decent light levels, that's not really going to benefit it a huge amount. And then once it's finished its month or two of growth, its leaves will just sit there, absorb all the energy from the sun, and then store that back into the tuber over the following months, which can probably take 3 or 4 months normally. But unfortunately, just because this likes to grow in winter, and we have such dark winters here in Scotland, the growth might be a little bit slow. We'll see how it does. I might have to put a grow lamp on it to just kind of increase the growth a little bit. It depends. If I can try and continue its growth phase into spring, then we might get some really good growth. Normally the light levels start increasing quite well in March, April time in Scotland, so if I can keep it growing right through winter into March, April, I can get some good growth. If it goes dormant before then the growth won't be so good. But I'm hoping if I keep it nice and cool, it's going to keep this growing phase a little bit longer, and we can keep this growing through the whole winter. There is the risk that it could get a bit too cold in my conservatory. This fortunately can handle down to -4, so a little bit of frost, it should be able to cope with it. I suspect the leaves might get damaged, but I'm hoping to keep the conservatory above freezing, so frost shouldn't be an issue. So it should do quite well. I'll give you guys an update, as I say, in a few months' time, probably when it's growing up its support, and I'm expecting some really big growth from this. It's the biggest tuber we've had yet on this. It's got a huge amount of energy stored in there, so it's going to put on a huge amount of growth.